still D Darren or did I just read Darren?
Oh, that's over
No,
here.
that's it. I'm Rob, the other ball guy.
We added a ball guy since you left.
So hang on, so do you wear glasses just so you can be differentiated? Is that the
Sometimes.
only one? Right, okay. So I think everybody knows me.
Yeah.
So I won't use valuable time in talking about me. I'm really excited about Jeff being here. So Jeff is somebody I met in Arkansas, as you all know. I'm a Goodwill ambassador.
You are, yes.
John, I take it very seriously.
He does.
I had the pleasure of working with Jeff for the first time 4 years ago. And Arkansas is just a tremendous startup place. It really is, and it's all real. There is actually no sizzle, it's all steak. I'd say actually it could do a little bit more sizzle.
Yeah, we don't
But
do that.
yeah, don't do enough because it's just a great ecosystem, great companies I've invested in. About 4 or 5 companies there, and Jeff and I with 2 other people, we set up a small fund in Arkansas, Tronic Ventures, which invests in startups from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Gavin came down to
Yep.
an event that we ran in Arkansas, so we do mentor camp. You've all been to mentor camp in Halifax. We do a mentor camp in Arkansas as well. This year we're not actually doing a mentor camp in Halifax. We're doing a mentor camp only in Arkansas. Jeff is tremendous. I'll let you speak about yourself.
Okay.
Tremendous startup.
And I'll spend maybe less time than he did introducing me, talking about myself, so we can focus on you guys. I'm sort of recovering startup addict. I've been through the process 8 times. This is actually the 8th venture, the one I'm running right now, which is called Startup Junkie Consulting. The name is characteristic of the fact that I love startups. I love people that do startups, and I'm at the point now where I want to coach and mentor and invest in people that are creating great businesses. And it's kind of an accidental business I tripped into. So at the downturn in the States and most everywhere else in 2007, I was running a venture-backed startup that had its roots in Silicon Valley. It was called Conaware. It was a mobile middleware company. It was backed by asset management company and by Draper Richards. We had a good head of steam. We were focused on a motor freight market, solving some of the mobility problems within service fleets and motor freight. But it was a point, that was my 7th startup that I'd been involved with, where you could see the downturn coming, and had a conversation with my wife, and after many, many years of having home equity and life savings tied up in a variety of startups, some of which went really well and some of which didn't, decided it was time for a change. So I actually went to work for the University of Arkansas and ran the tech transfer function there, and proceeded to get way outside my job description and got involved in teaching entrepreneurship, new ventures, and new venture finance at the University of Arkansas. And sort of came to the realization that there wasn't much of a startup scene there based on the last startup I had run. There wasn't any peer-to-peer mentoring. There was really not any entrepreneurship groups. There was not any angel capital. All the things that you kind of look at in the scene that typically are required to make something vibrant happen were missing at that time. This is 2004 through 2007 timeframe, to give you some context. And so I started getting involved in a whole variety of things. One was just not really asking permission from the state or from the government or even from the institution, but getting out and trying to get a regular cadence of programs, events, and networking that would bring the entrepreneurial community together, that would bring some of the big industrial players in, because it's really to their benefit to be involved in startups, to maintain competitive advantage and retain talent in the region. And the other was to begin to beat the drum to get investors out. You know, the interesting thing about that little corner of the woods where we are down there in the Ozarks is that in those 2 counties in northwest Arkansas, which most people couldn't find on the map, you have 7 Fortune 500 headquarters, including the largest company in the world, Walmart. You have 10,000 households that meet the requirements for Securities and Exchange Commission accredited investors, which means they meet the threshold to be able to invest. And there was maybe 10 people in that whole region that were actively involved. So it was a big opportunity to go out and do some things. So over the course of about the last 6 or 7 years, we've gone from 1 angel group to 10. We've gone from no really venture capital funds in the region that had coverage to a $15 million fund that's coming together that Permjot and I are involved in, and a $100 million growth equity fund that will be in place by the summer. We've run 4 accelerator cycles where there was none before, kind of on the ilk of Techstars and Y Combinator. And so a lot's happened. We've done the placemaking where we've got the co-working facilities now in place. So with just the whole idea of, if you're focused on talent development, attraction and retention, both founders and technology, and capital formation at all stages, we put in place the programs, the places and spaces, and the events and networking to try and make that happen. And that's how the company that I'm running now, I left the university, Startup Junkie Consulting, went from sort of an accidental ad hoc side venture to something I'm gonna spend, probably the rest of my time, working time, pursuing.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's it. That's the story, yeah.
It's really exciting to have you guys here.
So we do need you.
Awesome.
Danielle had mentioned we just did that, another startup. Oh, actually, were you here when we were talking about it? No.
No.
We were doing this, we did this startup kick-around event. Last year, there was a second one that came up, and then just recently we did a brainstorming session to try and figure out what is necessary to build a more cohesive startup community here.
That's our list right there on the board,
Yeah.
the wall.
And so a lot of good things came out of that, but I'm wondering, when you guys started pursuing this in
Yeah.
Arkansas, what were your first steps?
The first things were the things that cost the least, and that was to begin to build community by having regularly scheduled mashups and events and things that would drag people out that had an interest but didn't know where to start. So, for example, one of the very first things we kicked off was sort of a marriage of American Idol and Shark Tank that we call a G60 elevator pitch contest.
So they've done, Pitch 101.
Yeah, Pitch 101 was actually modeled
Based on-
after.
yeah,
It was actually modeled after G60. We told, was it Bob Williams, we said, hey, can we do this up here? And I'm like, sure, here's the playbook, go do it. But it was the whole idea, the contest is fun and it's engaging, but it's really, the intent is to bring the community out. It's a little bit of a game show feel, as you know, and the whole idea is just to get people used to being together. And those, as Google would say, those creative collisions that occur when you get people together is where the magic really happens. And so we've probably run 50 of those in the last 5 years, all throughout the Mid-South. So that became kind of a feeder. That was sort of an activity that would feed interest. You're not going to invest in anything based on a 60-second pitch, but the whole idea is if you communicate that well, you're opening the door to the next kind of conversation. And being able to communicate well is about 50% of it for a founder. You've got to be able to sell customers, you've got to be able to sell key employees, you've got to be able to sell investors. And investors look at that ability to sell legitimately, backed up by, if you make an assertion backed up by a fact, as kind of a key component to a founding team. So we started with the cheap stuff, getting those kind of events together. We also started by, and I gotta tell you, some of you probably, we may be too young to remember, it was, in fact, I think this started on SCTV, the McKinsey brothers. You know the one, anybody remember that? Yeah, so we were really a couple of boneheads when we got this thing started. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing, quite honestly, 7 years ago to get this put together. So we just sort of began to try things. And the next thing that we rolled out was something called the Natural State Angel Association. And originally that was just 3 or 4 knuckleheads that said, well, let's get together for dinner.
Gavin's been to it.
Yeah, he's been to it. But it's gone from this sort of, well, let's get together in a bar or pizza place or wherever and listen to whoever we could find that had an interesting company that we could pitch to, now where we've got companies that are in Y Combinator, companies flying in from Boston, because we've assembled a group of 300 people that are really strategic money, people that are either in funds of their own or that have ties to the major industries in the area and therefore can open doors on the customer side. And so that's turned into kind of a big deal thing that we run every other month. So the cheap stuff you do first. The placemaking and the accelerators and the expensive stuff that requires a lot of outside help, that's secondary. Once you begin to get the community built up, that's when you then can think about, well, we've got enough critical mass, we've got enough people, both service providers, investors, founders, techies, and freelancers together on a regular basis. Now we can do the more expensive stuff, like putting places in space and building larger funds and all that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think for me, I know I'm not from Arkansas, but seeing it as an outsider.
You're adopted.
I'm adopted.
Your citizenship papers are in the mail. They'll be there.
I love
Once we get immigration figured out, we get a spot for you.
Yeah. Big challenge, which depends on your expensive. But I think I take a slightly different perspective, and I think when I love visiting startup ecosystems. To me, what's interesting about Arkansas is they started off knowing where they were. Their ambition and their motto was, we're not Mississippi. And I think it's true.
Yeah.
And I think the problem with Halifax is it keeps comparing itself. I'm talking about Halifax. I don't know Cape Breton well enough. But Halifax keeps comparing itself to New Brunswick, and you compare anything to New Brunswick, things look good. And who's from New Brunswick here? You're not from St. John. St. John and Winnipeg, we're next off, we go to Winnipeg tomorrow. St. John and Winnipeg are the only places in the world where even when the sun comes out, it still looks horrible. It's true. But the thing is, you keep comparing yourself to New Brunswick in Halifax, and that isn't ambitious. And so the first problem is that you've got to develop that mindset that they have, that right, we are starting from the bottom. Where do we go as a region? The second thing is, Nova Scotia can never be a community. Cape Breton can be, Halifax can be. Northwest Arkansas, which is only a 2-3 hour drive from Little Rock.
Yeah, it's 3
is-
hours.
Yeah, 3 hours. Completely different cultures. And I've tried to do stuff in Little Rock. It's a different vibe, totally different vibe. I prefer being Northwest. So even Arkansas, there's a massive difference between the three. There isn't a Arkansas community. There's a Northwest Arkansas community and a
That's true.
Little Rock.
And we're trying to build bridges,
Yeah.
but it's without getting too much into the history, and there may be some commonalities. You look at, and I don't pretend to know everything about Nova Scotian history, but Northwest Arkansas is a hard scrabble place, and if you take it all the way back to the Civil War, there weren't plantation owners there because it's limestone hills and not much grew there other than trees, and you could run cattle. And so at the time of the Civil War, they kind of parted company with the plantation owners who were in the Delta area, in Mississippi Delta area, and who were in the South. It's a completely different mindset. A lot more like an Appalachian kind of a feel to it. The people had to work hard. They were used to having to work hard to scratch out a living, etc. And so when you look at people like Sam Walton that built Walmart, and J.B. Hunt that built the largest trucking company in North America, and John and Don Tyson who built Tyson Foods, the chicken company, they had all the disadvantages you can imagine. Not great education, not access to capital. I mean, all the things you can imagine. They should never have built the companies that they built in that region. But they were always buoyed by the fact that they had a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They were going to figure it out because they were used to a hard scrabble existence. Much different than the plantation, where you had lots of arable land and you had labor that didn't cost anything in the days of slavery. So the mindset was different. People were used to being scrappy. And I think what we try to do now there is kind of lift everyone up based on their example. These were people that built world-class Fortune 50 companies without any mentoring guidance, without any of the support. If we could provide the support, what else would be possible if you can build that community? So that's a different mindset than Little Rock.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating. I mean, we could talk for hours because I love this topic about startup ecosystems, but we can talk offline about that.
Yeah.
So, businesses, who wants to talk?
Yeah. So exciting news since your last visit. I came up with an idea. It's pivoted a little bit, and we incorporated. So Brian and I are starting up. We're 50-50 co-founders, and our company is called Phased.io, and it's a digital solution to succession planning in small businesses.
A digital solution to succession planning for small businesses.
Now, when we say digital solution, we don't necessarily have a solution right now, but we know that this is a problem that companies face. When employees leave, say you're employee 7 at a company, and you've been with them for 2 years, you've been building up stuff, you have a lot of knowledge capital in that company that, say, you don't write stuff down, you leave.
Who's your customer?
Our customer is basically the small business market that are.
What am I saying about using the word basically?
Yep. So
who's your customer? Yeah.
it's companies that are under 20 employees, I think.
Right now. So more so we were looking at student unions as a test market, as they have an annual turnover of employees every single year. But to work with them in communications, which was kind of my doing, it was really difficult because they had midterms, exams, projects. They didn't really give us much time. We went to a pitch competition that NovaCorp hosted at the beginning of the month, and they suggested going to small businesses. So we have done that. Now what we got into was, okay, how do we get these first people to work with, because we want to make it about the user. So we launched the pilot program, and we've actually had businesses around Nova Scotia applying to work with us on developing a solution that works for them. So we have 3 confirmed right now. We have an event planning company down around Yarmouth and Wolfville, Nova Scotia. We have Go Full Steam, which is a technology.
Richardson.
Yeah, and so she's one of our pilots, and we have a really big one here in the community is the Fiddlers Run Association. So they do different events and stuff, but they're not for profit. So we're covering a few different areas, but we're gonna, through the program, we still have 2 more to confirm, but,
What are you gonna do with these initial clients? What's the value that you're delivering?
It's building the product. So we're trying to figure, we're gonna be working with them to figure out like, alright, is an iPad app gonna work best for you? Is a desktop app gonna work best? What features are gonna work the greatest to get this kind of like effect?
What's the real problem in terms of economic terms? I mean, if you were to describe, this is the problem, this is why someone would pay to have it solved, how would you best say that?
I would say the information, the knowledge is stored, and that it can be pulled upon by request. So it's like succession planning is the preparation of an employee until the point of which they take over. But then that's where succession planning ends, and then it becomes training or on-the-job learning. But as we've been learning here at UIT, as we have questions come up, the majority of people here, we don't ask each other, we go to Google. If it's something that we're all working on, then yeah, we'll bounce the idea off each other. But the information of that know-how of a company can't be found on Google. It can be found inside the organization. So that's where we think that if you can get the information there and be able to pull it as needed with on-the-job learning.
Just think if one person knows how to order like the big water bottles for the water cooler, right? That person's sick, on leave, whatever it may be, then having somewhere where they put down that information as like, this is the buying procedure for getting water from whoever the supplier might be.
But your whole idea is to try to remove the issue of irreplaceability. So in other words, if someone got hit by a truck,
Yep.
if all the corporate learnings and the corporate memories in their head, then you're in big trouble.
Yep.
That's the
Yeah.
idea.
Exactly.
And it's kind of like the grand vision, as I was seeing it from a student union perspective, is that students could start to work on larger projects and start doing long-term planning versus their annual year-to-year. So this same concept could be applied to small businesses.
Do you think family, multi-generational, like family-owned businesses are gonna be a right target? Like a father and son or mother and daughter?
I can speak, my grandfather started a company and he died unexpectedly. My dad has been left to figure it out.
Yeah.
There will come a point where my dad is stubborn, he won't pass that down at an early age, he's gonna work till he dies. I have no idea how that company works. I've mowed the lawns there, it's apartment real estate. I've done a few bookkeeping and stuff like that, but I've never actually run the organization, I don't know who to contact, etc.
Do you visualize that there's gonna be sort of an apprenticeship aspect to this where key employees can shadow what others are doing? Because it's good to have knowledge written down, checklists and instructions, but an awful lot of good succession planning is, the way they did it at GE, for example, is the CEOs in waiting were essentially doing elements of the CEO's job all the way along. They were being prepared all the way along. So there was an element of shadowing or mentoring or apprenticeship. Are you thinking about those aspects as well?
We always thought of, or we started thinking of these jobs not as the people that are in them, but as the job descriptions that fill them. So if you're a junior developer that is doing all this stuff, you fill the junior developer role and you have duties that are assigned to you that you can see. And if you were to basically, like, if you want to, try and take on more responsibilities, you could go out and see what the senior developers do and see what their job descriptions are like. That's kind of a part of it, but I don't think West Collins been.
Yeah, I was actually asked that question at the Fundica, the NovaCorp thing, and for grooming employees to that point, that's really great, but I mean, in the small business sense, for like what I kind of see, I don't really have research to back this up, but where it's a fast-paced environment where you kind of fill a job as it needs to be filled, and sometimes you grab somebody in your organization, or you grab skills, better expertise in the small company from outside. So we're kind of focusing on providing that knowledge and keeping it there instead of like grooming the employee so much. But that is something that we could go to in the future. And I guess the concepts, Brian's going to throw up because he's heard me say this a million times. And it's not about golf tournaments, except this one. Anyway, so a database processes information. Information goes in, it processes it, it stores it. We are trying to apply the same concept to a job where the job position will process the person. there's people go through, they will access bits of information to the collection of data and knowledge and.
Did I do the exercise with you about NLP, language? Did I do the language exercise with you all last time I was here?
You did.
I think so, yeah.
I think.
Sorry?
You did,
Yeah.
I think so.
Where I said,
Family one.
family, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you use that, I think your idea is really good. Okay, I think your idea is really good. But the language you're using to describe the idea is terrible.
Okay.
So succession planning doesn't mean what you mean. I think what you're talking about is employee turnover protection. So if you are a business that suffers from employee turnover, we are a solution. Because every time there's a turnover, there's a loss of knowledge, etc. Succession planning is when someone dies, we can help. Nobody wants to buy that. Because nobody, we're all immortal. None of us are going to die. Okay? Well, none of us want to contemplate dying. Okay? I like Woody Allen when he said, some people want to achieve immortality through their work. I want to achieve immortality through not dying. So think about the language you're using. And secondly, when you actually said it, digital solution for succession planning, you're trying to get people who don't want to buy into digital. So you're alienating everybody, because the people who understand succession, they understand digital. But people who want succession planning don't understand digital. It's a complete mismatch. Think about language.
Let me tag on to that a little bit. So to that point, if it really is about avoiding the aspect of irreplaceability, so that if someone leaves, suddenly you've got other people who can pick it up, or you've got sort of that understanding of that job description. Trucking market, your annual turnover, your churn in long haul trucking is anywhere from 100 to 230% a year for drivers, because it's a god awful job. It's a terrible job. And if that's the case, that means you're having to pay, even if they've got a commercial driver's license, a significant amount to bring them on board, as much as $5,000 per driver. Think about that. You're going to lose every one of those drivers 2.5 times. This was J.B. Hunt numbers. So I guess what my point is, it could very well be that your early targets, and I don't know, this is a hypothesis you have to test, would be those places that naturally, because they're difficult, have extremely high turnover. So, and you may have already thought of that, but that may be an industry segment where you would find significant interest if you could figure out a way to make sure that those requirements were really well documented, and your transition time and your upfront training time for getting someone on board was a lot shorter.
That's part of the reason why we wanted succession, or student unions,
Yeah.
because we know they have a yearly turnover rate,
Yep.
as well as not-for-profits.
Yeah.
Because
How much money do they
But
have?
they lose,
Exactly.
But
it's a training
they
ground,
lose,
yeah.
they're a
So-
small business.
I remember there was a business, remember that great guy, that DJ business in Fairfield? The DJ, he
The
wanted to
DJ,
he was
Chun.
Chun.
One of the founders of
Yeah.
catering.
And I remember he had this great idea, and he could he could create virtual jukeboxes, and he was going to sell it to students because it saves you the time of changing tracks. So it saves you time because it was all automated. So I just remember telling him. So what you're saying is you want to save time and charge people to save time, and the group you've identified, because you identify students. So the group you've identified is the people who've got loads of time and no money. Okay? So, I just hate, I have this, whenever I hear of a social media app for students, because it tells them the best places to go, no one's working on that, are they? It tells you the best places to eat, it tells you where everybody's hanging out, these are students, A, they've got no money, and B, they've got loads of time, they can figure it out themselves. Okay, they're using loads of social media apps. So just make sure you go for lucrative, attractive markets. It's going to be harder for you to sell into a trucking organisation. But once you've sold into a trucking organisation, the quality of earnings is very, very high.
I'll give you another example too. That's an aging population of workers, because nobody your age really wants to do that unless they have to, I mean, quite honestly. So there's several groups that are working towards trying to figure out how to make that a cool job again, which will potentially cut down on churn. But if you can find those areas where churn is very expensive, and it's sort of a natural part of it, and you can figure out how to reduce that, and then you can show the value justification as to how much money it will save that business, because it's really expensive to have people cycling through. The learning curve is the part that you're trying to attack best, but just being able, if you have this kind of system where you're trying to reduce the impact of churn or people being replaced, I think ultimately you're gonna have to provide the value justification. This is how much money you can save, because you're not gonna have this degree of churn, or if you do have the churn, you can manage it better.
Another market for you may well be, women who go on maternity leave. When they come back, things move on. And for every year, someone is out of work, they lose something like 20% of their organisational knowledge. For every year they're out. And the problem with maternity leave is obviously employers have to leave those jobs open, quite rightly. So there you are tapping into an easy sell, because it's a solution they have to provide. So I really like what you're doing. You're just approaching the wrong market with the wrong language. Other than that, I think it's great. Cal?
Would it be the wrong market if it's universities? Because universities have tons of money, and like maybe if it's reducing, I don't know, liability for students drinking, or if it's taking up dean's time or something like that. Like universities have tons of money. It's the students that don't.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that is
Yeah,
a
'cause
bad market.
I think I talked about, the four different buyers you have. Did I talk about the four buyers? So with all your solutions, you've got four different buyers. And that's a really good example of where you've identified. You've got the economic buyer, which would be the university with the money. You've got the technical buyer, which might be somebody else who's, a trucking organisation. Well, let's take university and trucking organisation. So the technical buyer might be somebody within the university IT department. Is your program compatible? Does it interfere with the cloud? Will the Wi-Fi still work, etc., etc.? Technical buyer. Trucking company, there will be a technical buyer, which may be the HR manager, which is, can we work with the system? Is there data is there privacy concerns, etc., etc., etc. So that's a technical buyer. The economic buyer of a trucking organisation may be the HR manager, maybe the finance director. The user buyer is the students, different people. The user buyer will be the actual drivers, the truckers, employees. And then finally, for most of you selling to a big corporation, you have to find a coach buyer. So you have to find somebody who may work for the organisation, may not, but knows the organisation and can help them in.
The internal champion, in a way, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got to identify those four buyers. And what a lot of people don't do in a sales strategy, they don't identify who those different buyers are. And you need a different approach with each one of those buyers, different language to use, different,
When you do your customer development, how are you doing that? How are you doing your customer development now when you're going out and asking questions?
So far, we've just kind of, we had like, I got most of our questions that we have, like it's gonna be like an interview process, like maybe 1-2 hours a week, with these pilots, and that would be like, a lot of the questions, I've taken from, the Stanford University lectures that we've tuned into. So these questions would kind of be like original thoughts, feelings, then how they use current solutions, and do they go back to current solutions, and how effective are they, and do they use multiple tools together, and why,
So you're really doing pain finding. You're not leading with your solution. You're really trying to identify what their pain is without biasing the questions.
Yeah, and like,
That's good.
the way that we kind of see is like, if we can find those things, and while we're developing it, and if we can like, pretty much make the recipe, the fine-tuned recipe for the application and building it, then we'll have something to work from, and then that will really bring us to the minimum viable product, at which time we can test it on the brain.
Got it. What's your sense about the competitive landscape of what else is out there?
There are like a lot of really big corporate solutions, like SharePoint I think is one of them.
Yeah.
But there's also like little things that could also be used in the same way, like Evernote would be another company, any kind of note-taking application really, that has a way of like sharing that information. That's where I kind of see a little bit more competitive space with, but we're trying to take like trying to find really small features that work with them, and build into like one very small application.
But so there's nothing out there that you describe as people development or people management that allows you to quickly come up with position descriptions and continuity notes and all that. There's nothing that you're seeing yet.
The closest that we've seen so far is Trello, and what is the project management application, Trello combined with the Gantt chart. And that's like, kind of points at the critical dates that things need to get done. And Trello is just kind of in the major way they're using it, is just to see what everybody's like doing.
Basecamp as well.
Sure. Yeah. But those are kind of generic project management where it's shared workspace and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think part of what you're getting to is, so there's position descriptions of what you're supposed to be doing, or is there also a project management aspect to it that you're looking at? Is it more execution oriented, or is it more just, these are the continuity notes that are there?
Yeah, we don't keep track of actual project, we don't want to anyways. We just want to keep track of like, how you do certain tasks. So like a project may require you to set up a server, but we're not gonna keep that in our knowledge. We're just gonna be like, here's how you set up a server.
So I run a fund management business in London, and I'm the compliance officer. And one of the things I have to do every quarter is show the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, that our contingency plans are robust. And what contingency, and all financial companies in London, based in London, have to do this, where you have to show that in the event of a fire, in the event of death, in the event of flood, whatever, the business can continue because it's investors' money. So what I have to, I've got this very complicated risk matrix which I've developed, and there's loads of software available to it. So there are loads of models that you can use, because actually one of your markets, one of your ways in may actually be insurance companies, where an insurance company feels that they can lower the insurance, or do you call it key man insurance?
Mm-hmm. Key
So
person insurance.
key person. So we call it key man.
It's the 21st century, key person.
Key person, should be key person. We call it key man. It's still called key man insurance in England. So key person insurance, if key person insurance typically pays. So in our fund, if I was to die, there's a huge amount of money available to recruit somebody with my skills. Okay. Now that premium could come down massively if actually we don't need somebody with my skills. We just need somebody who can read. Seriously, because the instructions are all there.
That's true.
Seriously, so the premium is, they have to think, or they can read. So nothing I'm doing is rocket science. It's just, there's a codified knowledge, and all you're doing is codifying knowledge, which ensures you just got to think of ways. What I tell them is, how to make money. You've got to think about enterprise, because that market is done from what I'm hearing. And that's done in its specific, bespoke, etc. Routine. May well be through insurance companies saying, yeah, we are worried about these businesses because actually all the knowledge in the business is contained in the heads of one or two people, and if you come along and they buy your service and they're actively using it once every 6 months, and we'll do an audit to check that they are using it every 6 months, we will massively reduce insurance premiums, etc. Suddenly, your customer, your economic buyer, is insurance company.
Could also be banking the same way. If a lot of these small businesses are extending loans or lines of credit, one of their concerns is the viability of the business a lot of times is based on not just the forecast and the quality of the customers, but the management team. And so if there's not good succession, if there's not good processes for how people move along, then it could be a larger risk. So there might be an angle through banks as well.
How often do we say no to a deal, an investment deal, on the basis that all the knowledge is stored in one person's head? We don't want to invest in something where all the knowledge is contained in one person's head. You may, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to go too, because you can be too clever with stuff. You could even approach angel investors, or approach AngelList, and say to AngelList, or Gust, is it Gist or you could go to Gust. One of the things angels feel safer about investing in this because they're using this robust. You're not investing in one person's knowledge. The knowledge is being codified. Because what you're doing is really codifying knowledge.
And I think you're going to find through this process, you're going to find some market signals that may be a little different than what you originally thought. So be open-minded to that. Typically, most people, us included, go into something with some preconceived notions. Just be open to when you see those themes begin to line up to where the real pain actually is, seize on it. Don't be so beholden to your original idea that you don't pivot towards where the real pain is. And it's cool. There's a lot, people management is huge and getting bigger. So, and if you can do something in people management where there's a compliance trigger, like for example, we've invested in a company that does HIPAA risk management. HIPAA is the U.S. health and privacy mandate. Anytime you can get involved in a business where there's a governmental mandate, your cost of sales is going to be lower because they have to do it, and they're buying out rights. If having 25 down a school, bunch of people talking, federal motor carrier authorities in the US didn't mandate it. They said it was a recommendation, not a mandate. So if you can find something in what you're doing where there's mandates, where there's specific things that are required by government compliance, those tend to be better
You know,
sales
the
drivers.
word mandate always makes me laugh. I'm just very childish. When somebody says, "Oh, this is my mandate."
This is the guy I've been in the car with for 6 hours.
It was a beautiful driver. But just to make it sure that everybody else, it's relevant for everybody else. So let's just have a quick overview of the key concepts we talked about. We talked about cost of customer acquisition. So whatever business you're in, think about the cost of customer acquisition. We talked about the 4 different buyers because all of you will face that challenge: the technical, economic, user, and coach buyers, and they all need different messages and different things. We talked about mandatory versus discretionary, and you've got to think about how can you change your solution to be a mandatory rather than discretionary. You know, what is it, a vitamin tablet or vitamin tablet from a, what's the other one? Is it a paracetamol or is it a vitamin? You know, if you've got a headache, you have to take a paracetamol. Vitamins are nice to take, unless you're American and Canadian, you have the, because people get it in the UK, we don't, we laugh at Canadians and Americans who have the, every Sunday they put out their vitamins and put Monday, they have these vitamin boxes, don't they, Monday to Sunday, which I just find weird. And you put 3 or 4 in each little thing. Anyway,
We like taking pills.
yeah,
What of it?
tell me about it. So, but is it a vitamin? Is it a vitamin or is it a paracetamol? So what are
Customer.
plan, a digital solution for succession planning, which says nothing to me. Which says nothing to me. Whereas employee turnover protection or codifying knowledge or insurance, and then we also talked about routes into market in terms of channel markets. That if you do a startup and you are going to go to a if you're going to have a mass market strategy, as a startup, it will kill you. So if you think about Groupon, everybody keeps using as an example. Groupon, I don't think will ever turn a profit. And that's my prediction. I don't think Groupon will ever turn a profit because their cost of customer acquisition is going to kill them. So they're doing a kind of online offer with an offline cost of customer acquisition. That kills a business. So you cannot be in the online business if your customer acquisition costs are offline. So I just want to make sure that everybody gets something. So we've covered loads of concepts by using your, I just want to make sure that everybody gets value in all the conversations. So I think, did we cover any more concepts?
Why was the Groupon cost of acquisition offline?
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Offline, but as in they have to physically employ people, salespeople,
Oh.
sales forces, sales teams, to go around, cold call, knock on doors, visit restaurants, say, have you heard of Groupon? It's a very expensive customer acquisition cost.
And it's also hard, and this is the other thing, is you have to determine very early on whether or not it's an execution play, which means you have to go quickly, and there's not really competitive moat that you can build around it, or whether or not there's something truly differentiated. And truly differentiated doesn't mean patents or trade secrets. It just means something where you've got some unique differentiator. It may be relationships, it might be contracts, it may be specialized access. But being the same as everyone else means that you're gonna have to out-execute them. As a startup, that's difficult. So figuring out how to constantly differentiate what you're doing is hugely important.
You were asking questions?
Yeah, just about the different buyers, you said it was important to have it, like, identify your different buyers and
Yes.
have a different strategy for each.
Yes.
Is it more important to focus on finding one that works best for you, or just make sure you have your bases covered?
You have your basics covered. And the important thing is the language that the economic buyer will use is very different from the language that the user buyer will use. So for example, user buyers will get caught on to the idea of this is sexy to use, this is easy to use, this is going to make you look great. The economic buyer doesn't care. The economic buyer cares that your downtime will be minimized, your employee turnover costs will be down, normally it takes 8 months for your employees to be fully performing. Using our software, it will take 3 months. There's a 5-month saving, which means you get an extra 20%. You know, you're using numbers, facts. The HR buyer will say this will reduce your budget in terms of, you know, how much, what kind of people you recruit from. Because basically, if you're going from the pool of people you recruit are people with specialist fund manager knowledge to people who can read, the pool of labour has suddenly widened massively. So that's so using your solution, you're using different language with different buyers because they're motivated by different things. And where most companies, not even startups, most companies go wrong is they just don't understand fundamentally that different buyers require different language.
So it's about to identify those buyers.
But why do they want to buy this product? And the problem is, you want to sell them the product because it's an iPad or it's this or it's that. They don't care. They They just want something that works.
What was your fourth buyer, did you say?
Coach buyer.
Coach.
So Coach buyer is a good example. So I wanted to send it to Arkansas, and I didn't know anybody. And then I met these businesses in Winnipeg. And I met this professor called Carol Reeves, who's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So Carol Reeves became my coach buyer. And what Carol Reeves did, she didn't know that I wanted to sell. I mean, there was no such thing, but no such language. But she knew I was coming to Arkansas, and she arranged for me to meet lots and lots of people, including Jeff. And all I had to do, and a lot of people don't do this, is not embarrass her. That's all I had to do. And that sounds easy, but actually the amount of people that embarrass their coach buyers, because they try to, Jeff, I've got it here, I'll take care of it. They do that kind of thing in front of their coach buyer. You know, they'll put the coach buyer down, and I see that happen all the time. Or people don't realise that you've got to keep them in the loop. You've got to make them feel like, yes, you are the innovator, you are the change spotter, you are the network builder, whatever it is. You've got to give them the appropriate recognition. Because what they're after is not money at all, but recognition.
Yeah.
So Carol doesn't want a cent from me. Actually, I think it would be illegal for her to take any money off me. But that isn't the point. What you do is you acknowledge her, you refer to her, you make her feel good about having introduced me into the Arkansas ecosystem. And then she introduced me to lots of buyers like Winrock,
Yeah.
who then paid for me to come down. Jeff Amerine, who then became a buyer, economic buyer, he was the guy who actually signed us on some checks for me to come and do some work in Arkansas, etc., etc., etc. Does that make sense?
You turn them into champions, internal champions, and particularly if they're in large organizations. You figure out how to make them heroes in the large organizations.
Rachel Dunford spoke about it when she was talking about, I don't know, one of the companies that she was with, she was talking about.
Tulip Retail?
Was
Tulip Retail.
that it?
Yeah.
And they were trying to penetrate this one particular company,
Yes.
like, get in there, and she figured out after a long time that they were going after the wrong part of the business, and they couldn't find their champion within this. And then it was HR instead of sales, or it was, marketing instead of.
Yes.
And so then once they found that, she was able to kind of get that one person that was then able to bring them in and introduce them, and then she was able to see all tiers of the business.
Parmjot may have a different view on this, but
Baseball's coming to Arkansas.
oh, fantastic! Parmjot may have a different view, but one of the things that I see startups and companies at all levels do incorrectly is they've been coached for years and years and years based on the power map to try to sell at the C-level. Go in and sell the CEO, sell the CMO, sell the CFO. Generally speaking, huge mistake. Because if the C-level people are any good, they're turning right back around and taking that company that bypassed a normal point of entry and sending them right back. And guess what that does? Those people that are at that mid-level, the recommender level, the champion level, are thoroughly pissed off. They've been bypassed. And it's like, yeah, your chance of actually getting something done is small. So I think it was Guy Kawasaki said, don't waste time talking to the highest level people in the organization. Talk to the recommenders and the project managers and the administrative assistants. They're the ones that actually know what the hell's going on. So there's something about that where it's not to say you ignore the power map, it's not to say you don't build the rapport at the C level, but start with the people that you can make heroes that are in the middle of the organization, that are looking for relationships that will help increase their influence.
Well, what's interesting is, one of the things I love about Nova Scotia is I think Nova Scotia is in a time warp. And I think it's fascinating because the new way of doing business is coming through. And it's really exciting to be just watching what happens. So a great example is people asking for sponsorship money. And what happens is they know that they go to marketing directors. They know that. But what they do is they think they're clever, and because of the way business in Nova Scotia has done it, golf course mentality, and he knows my dad or whatever, and that is breaking down. And what's interesting is so many people are getting called out and what happens is you piss people off. So when somebody's already been told that you've got to approach the marketing director, and they say, well, I know better than that, I'm going to go straight to the CEO because we've both got penises, So because that's the kind of mentality. Why would I go to somebody who hasn't got a penis when So that kind of thing happens, and that happens here, and I've seen it all the time. It's hilarious.
I'm really glad this is live streaming. So
is this live streaming? We'll edit that bit out. we see this. I mean, Carol, you were actually in a conversation I was having with somebody, and questions were asked which I thought were inappropriate, and in other places you just want to get away with asking those questions. But what's increasingly happening is those things are backfiring because there is this professional class of buyers who come through, and you've got to go through them. And the reason why these C-level execs hire this great talent is because they are the buyers. And you just end up making sure that it's a definite no. And I can give you loads of examples if we weren't streaming.
I forgot. Were you able to slide over a little bit
Oh,
to your
God
left
no.
there?
God no, God no.
You can't see your full face in the camera.
That's the idea, that's the idea. But I can give you loads of examples, specific examples of organisations that have tried to be clever in the way they sell. And it's backfired enormously. So make sure you actually, and also Mentorcamp, one of the things we do at Mentorcamp is, we are always encouraged, especially by some of the government sponsors, to recruit stars. You've worked with some of the stars. They're shit mentors. They're absolutely shit. But the government sponsors are really, they love the idea of these stars. The best mentors we've ever had are people that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
I mean, the best guy, Joe Stump, I'd never heard of that guy.
Yeah.
And he is the best mentor, like by far, that I've ever come across. And most of the mentors that are awesome are people that you've never heard of. And the C-level people are so far removed from the challenges that you're facing.
You know, it's, well, not to get too much off on that, but it's a difference between the steak and the sizzle, right? And hopefully that analogy resonates, but some of the best people that are mentors or entrepreneurs are not the ones that are constantly looking for the media attention. If it's all about the media and whatnot, it's going to be all about them versus what they're really trying to do. Anyway, different.
And also, like, do you think that's partly because, like, if you're at a C-level position, you're delegating stuff that you don't like? So, like, that type of thing you're hiring because you don't enjoy it, so when someone comes and crashes your golf
Unless
game.
you're just a megalomaniac, unless you're just a micromanager, you've hired people that are smarter than you, ostensibly, right? If you're running a good organization. So I'll give you a classic example. I was a VP level at American Freightways prior to the merger with FedEx Freight, which was a motor freight company. And a guy came in that was selling a trucking solution, a trucking automation solution. And his very first words out of me was, "Oh yeah, I had dinner last night with Sheridan Garrison, who's the founder of the company. And it's great, and we talked about this and we talked about that." And it was a not so subtle way of saying, "You really don't have any power, Mr. VP, that was hired away from the East Coast to come back to Arkansas to run this thing. I'm already in tight with the founder." And it didn't say it subtly, but I knew that the reason why I was hired there was because there wasn't anybody there that knew shit about technology, which was why they hired me to do it.
Yeah.
And so I knew that Sheridan had totally empowered me to be able to make those decisions. I had procurement power, I had the authority to select or not select. And so that guy just succeeded in really pissing me off, right? And so there was no chance that guy was ever going to get a deal because it was a bad tactic. But he had been taught that this idea of coercive, well, I'm in at the C level, so you're just going to follow orders, was totally wrong.
People do that all the time in that space.
It is important to know the power map, but you tend to be doing yourself a disservice by trying to sell at the C level and bypass the champions. And it was a long-winded story about champions, but they're super important, particularly in a large organization, to getting something done.
Treat people with respect. I mean, it was really interesting. After the Go Instant deal, suddenly I was getting all of these emails asking. People knew that I knew Jevon, and thankfully I was telling them Carl up. Thankfully I met Jevon and got to know him before the success of Go Instant, because suddenly I was inundated with people requesting, "Oh, could you introduce me? Could you introduce me?" And it was really funny. There were 3 emails I got from people I had introduced them before, but they just didn't know who he was before. Suddenly they were, and I remember replying to them and copying BCC and Jevon. "Oh, I think I wanted to introduce you. You met at this occasion, da 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 da." And they're like, "Shit." You know. Anyway, I think there's a very important point about champion buyers. They are they're called coach buyers. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a great book by somebody called Hyman called Strategic Selling, where he really breaks down these 4 different buyers, what language you use, how you motivate them. And if you're doing a big enterprise sale, you actually have different strategies for how to approach each one of those, because they're all after different things. And the important thing is not to embarrass them. And it's also to understand that only the economic buyer can say yes, the others can say no. So the technical buyer doesn't say yes, he or she just doesn't say no. Does that make sense? Because I remember I was at Duracell. I was a salesperson at Duracell. And this is a really silly example of. And I was taught by the guy, talking about the succession plan. I was taught by the guy who had the patch before me to really get on well with the warehouse people. And this is true. I never used to be into soccer. Now I'm mad into football. But I was never into soccer. But he said, "Look, if you want to get on with the warehouse team, you've got to read up about soccer. You've got to start saying, 'Oh, great result last night, eh? Hey, oh, could you believe it? Oh, what a goal!'" And so I did that. I actually did that. And I was talking. I would always make time to talk to the warehouse guys. And then it came to the biggest sale I ever had to do for Duracell because it was Christmas and really big incentive. I remember going and trying to sell, and the guy who was the buyer turned around to the warehouse guy and says, "Look, have we got room in the warehouse to take all this stock?" And the guy, I remember the guy saying, "Who's it for?" I said, "It's a perm job." "Yeah, sure, he's a gooner." Arsenal. "He's a gooner, we'll make room for a gooner." But that's a really good example of where just treat everyone with a bit of respect, and you'll be amazed at how much influence. People that you don't think. I mean, it was really weird. The biggest sale I'd done in my career up to that point, I was only 3 years out of university, the biggest sale in my career hinged on the warehouse guy making room for my stock. And that happens all the time.
What other questions do you have?
There must be another business idea. We can stop the live streaming.
All right.
Because the other word for that is mansplaining. Have you heard that mansplaining?
Mansplaining?
Yeah, my partner explained it to me. When you'll have a group in a room, and I've had this happen to me loads of times. It's hilarious. And a woman explains something, but then a man has to say exactly the same thing that the woman said. And it's like, oh, I understand now. That's called mansplaining, where a woman explains something, then you explain back to the woman what she told you. But it's called mansplaining. You've not come across that?
Yeah.
Must be a UK thing. It's hilarious. I can show you videos on it. It's really, really fun.
Yeah.
Next business, next
So-
idea.
AJ, did you mention to do? Cool.
Okay, so then I do have a couple issues, maybe you guys could bounce off. When we started, Permed Out, you're aware of how we've sort of moved along with the program. I mentioned to you, Jeff, when we started off actually building things, when we started off building HTML and CSS, JavaScript, we did a chat project first. And so then it was basically just learning how to put something into a text box and then showing up and then building the server side so you're able to put things back and forth. Then eventually we had to build some sort of differentiator for the chat application. That's, I think, right around the time you came down, we had already worked on the different things. I think I presented query or something like that. So then we worked on a social networking application. So my project for that was a location-based event listing app. And it was something I didn't find, like it doesn't exist. And it's been nagging at the back of my head for a while. So even though I moved on to a couple other things, it's still there. And I really want to do it.
Give me an example of how it would work.
Okay, so you open up the app, and because we're in Sydney, I use your location to say, okay, these are the 20 things that are happening in town tonight. Then if I want to, I can do a search on a specific date, or do a search on different locations. So if I'm traveling to Halifax for the weekend, I can put in Halifax, April 30th, and that's gonna show me all the things that are happening there. If I want to refine it a little bit more and say I want to go to a music event, or I want to see a sporting event, or I want to go and do something in crafting, it'll narrow it down.
You can't get that in Eventbrite today?
No. Eventbrite only does ticket sales, right? So people make events that have tickets. Eventbrite sells it, so they aren't worried about t-ball games, and they're not worried about community meetings. They're not worried about any little thing. Facebook is the main platform right now that people make and create events and then share them, but you have to be following a page to get notifications whether or not that page has actually created an event, or you've got to be invited by an individual. So that's an issue. They haven't opened up sort of their location-based services. So Gavin and I were actually working on it last night to do a Google custom search to then do a check for a location, its events, and then go into those Facebook events themselves and pull it out. So I'm working on it right now.
You're gonna scrape things out, then you'll scrape the information and pull it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, it's it wouldn't be like I guess it is a bit of a crawler, but it's the only way to do it right now.
Sure.
It doesn't go against Facebook's privacy or policy, but that's really the only way to do it. Their API, their Graph API isn't open enough to allow you to just grab So even if you go on like Facebook search bar and type in events in Sydney, you won't see anything
Maybe
come up.
nothing.
So it strikes me as something that a lot of people would use. I know I would use it myself. I kind of just want to build it so that I just have it on my phone, right? Without even turning it into a business. But the more and more I approach people about it, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer. The issues come into place when I start talking about revenue.
Yeah.
There's a really tough, I can't figure out a revenue model there.
Because your idea is to give it away for free. It's not, you don't want it to be a subscription model, you want to use it.
Basically, you want to eliminate all barriers of entry, so there will be a login, but it'll only be for favoriting stuff and
Yeah.
having discussions on things.
Mhm.
You want to be able to open up the app and actually just see what's going on, and then do a search. Almost like Airbnb, where you would go on Airbnb and type in, I'm going to be in Mabu on the 4th of July,
Yeah.
and these are all the places that are available for me.
And there's not a pay-per-click play with that? There's,
I don't know. It did actually, I did a little bit more looking into it once, a couple days ago I decided I was actually gonna revisit the idea, and there was an app that did it. This app existed, it was called Hotlist. They started in 2008, they folded in 2013. They had, I think, 1.4 million over 4 rounds. They were based out of York, Silicon Alley. And anyway, they're off doing other stuff now. But the main functionality happened. But as I was talking over with the mentors, we were thinking it might have been a technology issue. It could have been like a traction issue, like you would have had to add a lot.
Where are they based?
Out of New York. There was also changes to Facebook's API in the last number of years, so that could have been it. They could have been using the API before it changed to be more secured.
So, again, taking the specific, we'll come back to this, but you know, a lot of people have a problem with how do I make revenue. Using that full customer analysis, what you think is, who are the economic beneficiaries? What will happen as a result of someone using the API?
It would be local businesses, because they would have more people showing up to, it's tough for these businesses to get their events out there to a wider audience that aren't already subscribed to them, right? So if you're not following them on Twitter, or you're not liking their Facebook page, and maybe you're not, these aren't people that are reading in the paper that you've got this little ad for a concert that's happening.
Okay, so that's one beneficiary. Who are the other beneficiaries? Who are the beneficiaries of this app?
There would be everyday users, because they'd be able to find more things that are akin to what they would like to do.
But how would I track or find out a behaviour change, or something that involved money change?
I don't know.
Because an app's only useful if you do something differently.
Right, okay, yeah, so,
What would I do differently? If I had this, what would I do differently that I'm not doing now?
there's several instances I can give you. So if you are, well, you guys are traveling to Sydney tonight, right? And let's say we're not gonna go out and have dinner and maybe have a beer. If you were looking for something to do, instead of going and asking a local, you know, what can I go and do? You would just be able to open up this app, put in the location where you are, or actually it would just show you where you are. Or you could plan ahead and say, you know what, instead of just staying in my hotel room because I don't know anything about this town, I don't really wanna talk to anybody, but I still wanna be social, I still wanna see some music, or I still wanna.
Right, so you just come up with a great, so what you've done is, who does that role now? Who does that job right now?
A local.
Concierge.
Thank you, concierge. What does Airbnb not have?
Concierge.
So what this app could become is the Airbnb concierge.
Right, that's a,
it is an online concierge service in a way.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
And you might even be able to play the angle where there's loyalty points, work with a credit card company, because they're if they show up at a venue, they're gonna use a credit card in all likelihood to pay. So what would the motives be of that credit card company? Well, there's loyalty. If you use this application and you use that credit card to pay, as when you get to the venue, there's stuff to pay for. There might be a loyalty angle there.
Yeah,
You get
yeah.
mileage or points or whatever else.
Yeah.
Or a differentiator, because the most commoditized product is probably car rental.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were on we rented a car, and if you knew what the journey was, they could tell us instead of us. Because he was complaining about, one of the things Jeff loved about being in Canada was the lack of billboards. I've never noticed this before, but when you're driving in Arkansas, after you told me, I noticed billboards everywhere on the road, so you don't see the views. And here, luckily, there were no billboards. And then what do? We see this billboard from
Mother Webs.
Mother Webs. And said, let's go there, looks good.
You only saw one. There's about 50.
The interesting thing about that was there's one right when we got into town, and then after we passed it, there was one we were leaving town, facing the same way, and I was like,
Why?
was that just for people that missed it?
Yeah, it actually does say turn around and go
Does
back.
it? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
wow.
that must be it. That must be it.
But the point,
It was good.
But the point is, if we had programmed into Avis, if we had told Avis, which they would probably want to know for insurance reasons anyway, that this is the route we're going down, and Zipcar, so this would be a really good solution for Zipcar, because in Zipcar you do have to tell them where you're going. And then Zipcar want you to, if you think about the way Zipcar make money, they are incentivized to make you hold the car for longer.
Okay.
So if I hire a Zipcar in London, and instead of hiring it for 3 hours, because this app has told me all these exciting things I can do, because when you're here you should also do this, when you're here you should if you want to see this view, stop over the, what was it called, Dior? Something Dior? There was a look-off point, and we were stunned by how stunning it was. But if somebody had told me beforehand, do this, suddenly Zipcar actually, they can monetize, actually we are making more money, because this concierge service has made sure that they're doing this, or they're going to this event, etc., etc., etc. So there are, but again, to me, it's not important that we come up with a solution for you. It's more important that we think about how we do that. So we think about, well, what is this? Who does this at the moment? Concierge service. Well, who doesn't have a concierge service? Airbnb. So it's always a thing about thinking about what are the economic benefits? What does this replace? Who, when you said a local, great. Well, if you were from out of town, what does that local look like? It looks like a concierge, etc. So it's the exercise to me that's more important than the answer.
That's interesting too, AJ, because you had just shared a resource about a concierge service in Boston that was developing. And we had a conversation about the development of concierge services on the East Coast especially. So if there was a way, like you were drawn to it naturally, in theory.
Yeah.
If there was a way to do social itinerary concierge
What was
service
the other
or
one
something
called?
like
The
that.
hit list?
Hot list.
Hot list.
Yeah, hot list. There's only you can only find about six articles on it online. There's about 2 or 3 videos. So you can see what it looked like. Then there's a video of the guy actually trying to use it, but it was completely scrubbed of data. So by that point in time, I would say they closed in 2013. They probably failed in 2011.
There might be another angle to use some influencer marketing, whereas some of this can be content driven. So you could line up bloggers in these certain regions that will talk about the coolest stuff and have that be part of it. Because people tend to be drawn to content. They really don't want to be sold. They want to be helped.
Yeah.
And so there may be a content angle here as well.
I was also looking at so there'd be a subscription-based service that businesses themselves could do, where they could do a featured event, right? They could pay for a featured event or pay for better search engine optimization within the app, right? So if it's Governor's Pub and Eatery, and they do a show on every Friday, and they want to get more people up to that show, they could then pay for the subscription-based ad and say, like, you're going to be in the top 5 of the search results, rather than potentially by alphabetical order be listed down lower.
It's the same concept of paying to promote your post on Facebook. The same idea.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
And then moving into, so right now, as I said, Facebook covers sort of a whole swath of different events. So you want to capture that first, right? So you don't break behavior. You don't want people to have to stop doing something they're already doing and then do it on your platform.
A lot of people are nervous about Facebook because of the amount of data they collect. But people don't often want to tell Facebook what they enjoy doing, which is bizarre. It's increasingly happening.
They're still doing it anyway, though.
Yeah.
If people are making events, the place that they're making it right now is on Facebook.
Yeah,
Or they're big festivals and concerts, and they're putting them on Eventbrite. So there's a way to use Eventbrite's API to pull in their information too, but that's past MVP, I think.
You can categorize check-ins from Foursquare and Facebook Places and stuff. If enough people are checking in at a spot, it's an event. It's all public check-ins.
Yeah.
You could make events on the fly with check-in.
I
Have
wanted
you
to-
tried contacting the founders and just asking them why it failed and why
I
they
tweeted at
dropped?
Chris, but I think it might have better chance with their CTO, Eugene Jen.
Yeah.
He's a developer at another company right now, and he seems a lot more active on his Twitter and not as,
Okay.
he seems like he's here, like in his mind, the other guys seem like they're up here.
The other advantage of doing something in partnership with somebody like Airbnb or whoever, or car rental or credit card companies is, it's your route to market. But the danger is if you went to Airbnb, you got to work out, well, how much would it cost them to develop the solution on their own? So, you know, there's that competitive
I
risk.
think it would be a company like that, either like an Eventbrite or
Yeah.
an Airbnb that you're eventually looking for acquisition.
Right.
Right, so once this has gained enough users,
I have a question.
I'm just amazed at the
You
solutions
guys.
out there.
Sure.
It's related to this, so let's say you did wanna build this thing for Airbnb, right, or to look at it as an Airbnb acquisition target, like, should you research what Airbnb develops in their platform and try to like make yourself fit into their
So they're using-
technological
I think they
solutions, so that
use
when they wanna acquire you,
Ruby.
say, oh, we're using your language.
So,
to-"
so if they're, you know, if they're
Does
writing,
that
if they're
matter?
written on Ruby, then, you know, try and develop the app in Ruby and.
Yeah.
It certainly wouldn't
Naturally.
hurt, because a lot of times the reason why acquisitions fail is it's either technical integration or it's a mismatch of cultures. So understanding a lot about their culture, how they operate, the chemistry of the organization, and what technology they use is really important.
But then would that make you not a good target for, say, Airbnb doesn't want it, but Eventbrite wants it, they got a different.
Everybody wants to be
language.
Airbnb, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a risk. I guess you pick your spots, and you think about if there's a way of insulating that by having a good API, maybe it doesn't matter so much.
Okay.
But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to get to know potential acquirers, to talk to them, to seek their advice, necessarily without giving away too much of what you're doing. But it's good to have those kind of contacts early.
But these two South business. So we said, well, what's big at the moment is Groupon. So they said, right, let's do a Groupon Cape Town. So they started this Groupon type business, and they made it as close as possible without being sued to Groupon. And what they did was, which was incredible, they emailed Groupon to say, hey, we'd like to be acquired, kind of thing, straight away. And they would send them metrics, and Groupon or how they just through Groupon said we're interested. And then they got bought by Groupon. So they were only self-employed
Well, that's great.
for about 3.5 months, and then Groupon bought them, but then they had a 2-year earn-out that they had to hit certain numbers. So that was one example where you could start a business today and say, you know, I want to be bought by you, and here are the metrics. The other great example is these two great entrepreneurs in London had gone to this place and seen this thing called Starbucks, and they figured because of the explosive growth of this thing called Starbucks that soon they their strategy was not to make and Amerine was hero. So I Mexican. And tortilla was very smart. They were to be bought by Chipotle. Something like just 18 months, I got 3.5 times my money back.
Wow.
Because they didn't, funnily enough, they didn't get bought out by Chipotle, they got bought out by something else who wanted to get it quicker, bigger, faster to sell to Chipotle.
Oh.
So the point, very you spot it works best when there's an offline thing, where either the cost of getting customers is offline, etc., etc. Because Groupon would not want to come to a market where actually they're going to start from scratch.
So I have 2 more questions. For because this, you know, it's another social network based app. Have you guys any experience in user acquisition for sort of these like larger, you know, like you need a lot of users to
Two-sided
use this
markets.
stuff. Yeah.
A little bit, as a board observer of a very fast-growing e-commerce company.
Okay.
It's hard.
Yeah. What's the strategy? I mean, like, how do you? We're in Sydney right now, and I can move this thing to Halifax, or I could try and go into a bigger populated area like Toronto.
It's kind of a numbers game, and it's expensive. And the way I've seen it work in the e-commerce side is there's an element of direct mail, believe it or not, for what they were doing. There was customer capture and customer harvest through figuring out how to monetize Facebook ad spend, which is plateaued. At one point, they had 8 million Facebook likes, 8 million Facebook users. It's an expensive deal, but you need to understand the customer acquisition cost, the user cost, what it takes to get people engaged for whichever model you're going to do. And you also need to figure out if virality is even going to be a play, because it's different based on different demographics. As an example, what they did, it was a fail fast and iterate model, but this was a specialized e-commerce company called Acumen Brands. And they started out with the theory that they were selling medical scrubs, scrubwear, and they were selling workwear. And it was called Scrub Shopper and Toughwell. And those were both like $2 or $3 million businesses each online. They wanted to replicate each one of those in categories where they didn't have, there was no market leader. And it was a bit of experimentation where they were going to do N number of these until they found something that stuck, and then they were going to build depth. And so it was kind of an expensive proposition initially, experimenting, because you had 10 different supply chains that you had to manage. You had different user acquisition strategies that you had to identify. What they found was with Western wear, with country wear, with boots, that there was an 18 to 50-year-old female buyer, higher income, that not only would they buy the boots, they would tell everybody they knew that they bought the boots on Facebook. And so the virality component kicked in, and their customer acquisition costs, their users that would come to the site became a lot less. So the strategy there is study some of the models that have worked as how people have done it, but it's going to be different based on the demographics of the users you're going after. What a teenager or millennial might do is going to be a whole lot different than what older, higher income folks might do.
Yeah.
And how they talk about it.
I have to try and figure out what my target market is
Yeah.
for the user case
Yep.
by, who goes out the most often.
Yep.
And who might not be completely sold on their own
Well,
spot.
and I've got one more input for you. Read a book by Jay Baer. The last name is spelled B-A-E-R, called Utility, Y-O-U-Tility. His basic premise in that is the most effective way to do user acquisition is by being helpful first. And so providing useful information to a demographic of users that will then draw them into the site. And that's where content-based marketing and providing useful information, it's kind of a pay-it-forward strategy, but the back end of that is, once you have the reputation for being helpful, then you're gonna get the following.
Right.
And that's content, that's regular cadence of being out there with useful information, subtle selling.
Yeah.
Utility is a great book. I'd recommend you read it because it can help you with this specific problem.
Thank you.
So you were about to say something else, you were saying the demographics,
Yes. I think I was just, I'm gonna have to identify that target market, like that use case, that, whoever that end user is, figure that out, so whether or not it's like, 20 to 27-year-old.
Continue to narrow it too. Narrow. Don't be afraid to be really, really polarizing. Narrow it. Maybe it's 18 to 24-year-olds that frequently attend live music. Whatever it is, narrow it initially as much as you can.
18 to 20-year-old.
Well, yeah, narrow it as much as you can.
Guys will go where girls.
Yep.
Do you know what the average age of a Porsche driver is?
No.
Do you know the average age of a Porsche?
45.
45?
55.
It's 57. It's 57 is the average age. What would happen if Porsche started marketing and using advertising models who are 57-year-old, slightly overweight men? What would happen to their brand? Sorry?
They'd plummet.
Just be very careful.
27-year-olds want it.
So it's not about who your demographic is, it's who your demographic wants to be.
The brand association.
There are loads of products. I mean, Marks and Spencer's a big UK retailer, and they realised that the last time they measured men and women was in the 1960s or something, and the sizes were based on 1960s. So then they tried to do this honest refresh campaign, and they showed in this model slightly overweight people trying and loving their clothes. It was a disaster. It was a total disaster. So I was, and again, you get burned by certain experiences, and sometimes you learn the wrong thing. But I always remember I started in a food business and selling cakes, and I was always told that the holy mantra for us was if we could sell low-calorie chocolate or fat-free cakes. So we developed fat-free cake range, and we got Heinz Weight Watchers to license the Weight Watchers brand to us. Paid a fortune. This was one of Mr. Kipling cakes. And so we did this massive range. It was a total and utter disaster. But all the customer research, all the demographics, we had got everything spot on. The demographic, the colours of the marketing. It was a big company, a very sophisticated marketing. But it was a complete disaster. And the reason was people love the idea of fat-free. But actually, when people buy a cake or a chocolate bar, they want a treat. They don't want low-fat fish and chips. They want, give me the flavour. And so, I'm always nervous at market research. People actually don't know what they want. And you can do all the market research because my demographic is this, but actually, they might be aspiring to be.
It's really important to do A/B testing to validate that what you think they've said they want is matched or mapped to their actual behavior.
What is that, A/B testing?
A/B testing, just so you test some assumptions. So you try a bunch of things, small iterative steps. You try one way of presenting content, one color scheme, one product mix, and you see how that works. Small iterative assumption tests that you do with your technology, your offering, your marketing brochures, whatever. And then and if that doesn't work or that works to a certain level, then you try something else. It's a variation. So it's, again, application of the scientific method to test your hypothesis and get back empirical data so that you know, we thought this was the demographic. It turns out they said one thing, but they did something else. And you can prove what they did based on putting that kind of a test out, see how they actually respond.
I'm assuming you want to do that as early as possible.
Absolutely, early and often, and as inexpensively as you possibly can.
And Patrick Hankinson is probably the best brains on A/B testing.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
just phenomenal A/B testing.
He's good.
A great example was a bank, a mobile phone company, cell company in the UK, O2. They did this testing where they found, when you go to live chat, so a lot of customers having problems paying their bills or whatever, so whenever you had a problem, they send you a text, and then they found that the name of your helper, your live chat person, was always Mike or Sarah, because they'd done research which showed that Mike and Sarah were trustworthy names. So but actually what happened was people just didn't believe it, and they didn't want to hand their credit card over to Mike, and most people knew that the live agents were in India, and there aren't many Mikes and Sarahs in India. And then what they did was they then started giving the agents real names out. So you'd have Siddhartha or Dapik or all these names out. And they found the response of people handing over credit card details went through the roof. Because suddenly, all the assumptions that they had done, all the market research was wrong. People didn't believe, they liked the idea of Sarah or Mike, but they didn't trust that the person on the other end was Sarah or Mike. Does that make sense? People know when they're being manipulated.
Yeah, that's right.
You know? When people start giving their real names, they handed over the credit card details. It's very interesting. So just be a little bit careful. Market research will often tell you what you want it to tell you.
That's the business for focus groups as well, because people will say nice things to you because you're sitting in the room with them.
Absolutely. Oh, the best example is election polls. Most people who vote Conservative in a pollster, especially if people are watching them, will say no, they're voting NDP or Liberals, but privately vote Conservative. It's a real UK phenomenon. Because nobody can understand how the Conservatives kept winning these elections, because nobody's going to vote for them. And then you found out secretly people agreed with them. And then the Tories actually did an election campaign saying, are you thinking what we're thinking? Because, and the answer was no, because they voted Labour. But it was very clever, because it was admitting that it's okay to be a Tory. It's okay to be a Tory. It was interesting.
I have another question, which kind of pertains back to our company, but I'm just wondering on, we're at a later stage than a lot of you kind of picked up quick.
Sorry,
so
just one thing.
Yeah.
That was something I was talking about, said FX. We went past Antigonish.
Oh, cool.
Mother Webs, that was
yeah.
really good place to go on Thursday.
And that's right in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
We
There's not much in that neighborhood.
You saw a McDonald's and the university.
That's it, yeah.
Sorry.
So my question was, what would you as investors want to see at the stage that our business or startup is at right now? What would entice you to invest to see progress in the future? Like what kind of things,
Want me to take this first? I'll go first. Okay. For me, it's always all about the management team, the confidence in the management team. But typically, I won't write any checks at all until I see some validation of the business model. Some validation that you're able to solve a problem that someone will pay for.
How
There
big
has
is
to be
it?
some traction.
How big does the traction have to be?
Yeah, it depends. That's a judgment call.
Alright.
It's a judgment call, and it depends on how much your monthly recurring revenue is increasing. But a lot of guys like me, and I'll only speak for a perm job, there's enough good deal flow now that we're not writing a lot of checks for pre-revenue stuff that's not validated. So the theory is, and this is US centric in many ways, but see if you disagree. You gotta start out of your own wallet, being as scrappy as you can, bootstrapping. Then it's the triple F round, friends, family, and fools. And then once you've beat some risk out of it, you've got some validation, you've added some value, then you're ready for an angel round typically. And that's even to the 50 to 250K type of round. People are not writing a lot of checks. Maybe they are in the valley where it's a whole different cosmic universe. They're not everywhere else in the flyover center of the North America or coastal areas other than Silicon Valley. So traction, some validation that people are gonna buy it as quickly as you can. That's what works for me.
So just to give a different answer, I agree, yeah, absolutely. But just to give you a different,
Sorry, could I ask a question on?
Yeah.
Do you mean that like you wouldn't even consider until you've gone through friends, family, and fools?
Yeah, I like to see it to the point where you've got some customers that are paying. You know, they could be pilot customers, but I need some revenue, some proof that someone will pay to have it solved. Now that makes it really tough for two-sided markets where you're trying to gather up users. And again, so what that means to you is, for a lot of two-sided markets, I'm probably the wrong guy to go to. My predisposition is towards companies that are solving problems for enterprises, that are maybe gonna be SaaS-based or subscription-based, or companies with tangible products that they can sell, that can scale. If it's the next Facebook or the next whatever social media thing, I'm probably not the right guy. There's people that know how to do that better.
Thank you.
so I'd come up with two different perspectives. Well, I agree with what Jeff said. Investors and businesses, you face two risks. There's a technical risk and there's a market risk. Okay? So technical risk is, will the solution work? The market risk is, will the market buy it? Most investors, not all, but most investors will invest in things with technical risks but not market risks. Because I think there are enough brains out there and there are enough smart people out there that if you throw enough money at a technical problem, they will solve it. But what I'm not convinced about is that people can sell. So the market risk for me is so if you came up with this, look, this gets rid of the need for energy, this gets rid of the need for electricity, you know, wow, I want to invest in that. And you explain roughly this, you know, voodoo kind of science behind it, I'm like, well, whatever. But that gets me excited, I mean, you know, because there is a huge, I know that if that works, the market will buy it, and then the risk is entirely technical, not market. Whereas if you come up with the solution that you've come up with, I think for me, the risk is entirely market, which is why you have to have traction. Now, the danger is you might not be able to get traction without money. So what I urge companies like yours to do is, if I was advising you, I'd say, find one large company with a real turnover problem, who employ knowledge workers with a turnover. So that's a double whammy. Knowledge workers and an employee turnover problem. And then I would almost offer to be a consultancy to them where you get paid a very small amount of money to co-develop this product. People forget that Microsoft started off as a consultancy project for IBM.
Yep.
And I think Apple did as well. I'm not sure though, I'm not sure my stats. Anyway, there are loads of very, very big companies that started off as consultancy projects and then they productized and became, you know. So I would almost, if I was your business, my advice to you would be, stop doing the focus groups and the pilots and off, you know, who cares what a customer in Walkfield thinks about it? It's just not interesting enough. Whereas if you tell me, we went to this big organisation, we started this product, we started this product, the result of that was this, and we got paid revenue. Now we have a product and we know it works because we've got the, now that is telling me something, and it also tells me you've overcome the market risk.
It's difficult raising money at all levels, and and traction is really king these days in particular, more so than having intellectual property. It proves that you can sell something. Investors are interested in momentum. So what does the momentum mean? Momentum in selling, if you prove that you can sell something. And momentum is also, a lot of investors, it's a race to be second, right? Everybody wants to jump on a deal when there's other smart people in the deal. So if they see investor momentum, that's proof what does that prove? That's proof that you have likely been able to sell your customer segments, and that's proof that you have the ability to raise money. Because particularly at the angel stage, what they're banking on is that you can get to a Series A. You can get to a larger player. That's sort of the validation that things are going to continue to progress. If they don't have confidence, if I don't have confidence that somebody can not only get money out of my pocket, but someone else's, probably not a good bet. All startups rise and fall with your ability to sell. Sell great employees, sell investors, sell customers. That's really true.
So if we get like 100,000 users but zero revenue out of them?
Well, that's traction. That's traction. I mean, user base can be traction, and Metcalfe's law kicks in, and there's a whole bunch of other things associated with that. Traction can be measured in multiple ways.
It depends. So I'm actually, this is where it answers your question about what would you do in terms of boarding of users, Toronto, etc., etc. So I'm chairman of a company called Wuxi. And Wuxi, we make videos online, and the business right now, you've met Fergus. You've met Fergus. Great company, great team, been involved for 8 years. Suddenly we're getting real traction. We've hired really good people. But actually, it's a two-sided marketplace because we want people who need videos. Explain it. So you guys, if you're starting a business, you might need an explain it video. So you might think about coming to us and saying, we want video. So Go Instant. We did their video, we did Tether's video, we did Blue Light's video, etc., etc., etc. So we've got a good track record in Canada. But what we struggled was we needed to get a creative community, and now we've got more creatives than Pixar. So we could produce a Pixar quality movie in half the time and probably a quarter of the cost because we've got that creative talent. But we were really struggling to build up a community. It's a two-sided thing. So the biggest hiring, the best thing we did was we hired a community manager. Very early on, we hired a community manager whose job was just to build and engage and activate and supercharge the user base. There's also, we learned from your mate, Carl Rove. Carl Rove, when he ran George W. Bush's second election campaign. And his whole strategy was, we don't need to convert anyone to the cause, just supercharge the base. And we actually learned that lesson. Sometimes all you've got to do is get someone who supercharges a base. And that was one of the best hiring decisions. And we hired this guy in Portugal because it doesn't matter where somebody is. If they're online, it doesn't matter where they are. And he was dirt cheap. There was so much talent available, really cheap. And he was working part-time for us. And he was one of the best hires we made.
When you say energize, what do you mean?
I mean engage, talk to them, find out what their issues are, enter dialogue, respond to them. Because what happens is if you're the CEO and you're trying to talk to customers and you're trying to develop software, and you can't do it. You just can't do it. Whereas some people, their job is to write blogs, is to find out who's writing blogs, to post things, to share links, to share knowledge, to create content. Just get the base talking, to share advice, to share like event thing. If you are going to this event, be careful, the weather is expected. Just little things like that. Like, wow, okay. It's like when you landed yesterday. Can you turn the heat up?
The shortest path to revenue is typically what will convince investors to come on board. And doing that with as non-dilutive of money as you can initially. Your own pocket, friends and family, government, wherever you can get it to knock that risk down. Because good investors are not thinking about what a big profit's gonna be, how much money they're gonna make. They're thinking about what could go wrong. And is this team, because fundamentally as a startup founder, you're really only two things, a problem solver and a risk manager, and that's it. You've got to be able to solve problems, you've got to be able to prioritize the risk that can kill you the quickest in the business and knock those down. And those risks are as Parmjot said, they're technical in their market, but there's financial risk. Are you thinking about capitalization the right way? Are you raising the right amount or too much? There can be regulatory and legal risks. Think about all those risks, the things that can derail you, and figure out how to manage your way out of that.
Just on that point, is there any kind of simple techniques or metrics that we can use to assess ourselves from a risk perspective?
Yeah, in terms of sort of a management maturity model.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one of the things that not all founders, first time or even later, do well, and that is to be really reflective about what they're good at. And then to surround themselves, honestly, with the people that are going to complement what they don't know how to do. And it gets said way too much, but hire people that are better than you if you can. Your job is to be the chief evangelist, to convince people that there's a vision. And don't be afraid to hire people that are better than you in the things that you're not good at. Teams are what really capture money. Good teams where that investor feels like this group's going to figure it out. Maybe they've just got a small amount of traction, but I have confidence they have all the bases covered. Yeah. So be reflective and introspective about what your strengths are and work to fill those in with other people.
There's also some frameworks. So if you look at children's companies, they're fantastic.
Yeah, I
Risk
used to work in
management.
insurance.
So management risk, operational risk,
Yeah.
liquidity risk is a huge one for startups. Liquidity risk. Most businesses that fail are highly profitable. They've just run out of cash. So capitalisation, liquidity risk is a huge risk. Most businesses. So I run a fund, an R fund in London. We take over businesses that have just failed, but all the businesses we take over are profitable. They've just run out of cash. So then we recapitalise it. We look at the financials, etc. So that's a big risk, personnel risk, etc., etc., etc. But there's a whole. If you Google it, there's a whole raft of, and it's structured. All the risk there. Something else I was going to say. So Mentacamp, talk about hiring people. One of the things I always do is I only, and I've got a big ego, and I know I'm pretty good at mentoring, but I will only hire mentors. And every Mentacamp, there's about 30 mentors, but they all have to be better than me. Because there's just no point in me getting a mentor if I could do the job better. There's just no point. So it's a pretty egocentric selection criteria, but I've yet to have a mentor that I've come across, a Mentacamp that isn't better than me. That because I love learning. I love learning. So when I'm sitting in on mentoring sessions and you hear someone like Jeff, you hear someone like Joe, you hear someone like Patrick or Gavin speaking about something that you have absolutely zero idea about, you shut up and listen and learn. It's fantastic, and you need to. Peter Sagal wrote this book, I think, in the 80s, The Learning Organisation. And he talks about, well, what is an organisation? What is a startup? And we use different words now. They used to be called learning organisations, then became called startups, and soon they'll be called something else. You're a learning organisation. Really, if you really, because you're learning from loads of mistakes, you're testing. And Stanford, the course they run, first time I came across a definition of a startup was at Stanford. And only last year, so I've been involved in startups for about 8 years, but I never knew what the definition was. And it's a project or a business idea looking for a scalable and repeatable business model. So it's all a learning organisation. Because what you're saying is we're a startup because we don't know yet what we need to figure out, but we're hoping we'll figure it out. So Apple is no longer a startup because it's actually figured out a repeatable and scalable business model. And there's a trend now for loads of big businesses to say, oh, we're still a startup. No, you're not. You've figured it out. And there are some startups that aren't actually startups even when they start, because the restaurants aren't startups, because they have figured out a repeatable and scalable business model. What we don't know is whether they're making money out of it. That isn't a startup, whereas a startup is you haven't figured out yet.
Just want to apologize for upstairs. This is a social innovation center that is not soundproof. So there's step dancers and bagpipers on both of us.
When do the
4
bagpipes
o'clock
come?
every day.
5:30? They'll be starting at 6.
Can't wait for the bagpipe.
We do want to get some cake right.
You gotta roll some Guinness in if we're
We
gonna
can
do
go
that.
right upstairs. Culture. But
That's
anyway, no, I wanted to just pause for a second, see if anyone needed to take a break for a couple minutes, wanted to grab a coffee, or if we want to keep going, maybe take a 2-minute break or a 5-minute break.
I could do 2 minutes.
Yes.
Alright, thank you guys, it's great. And we blew up your Twitter already, so check your phone.
Cool. Twitter,
Yeah.
woo! More Twitter followers.
Yeah.
Best place to tweet. If you want to get more Twitter followers, just somehow find an excuse to tweet about Cape Town. You'll get
Cape
a
Town.
Cape Town. They're the weirdest kind of. They just love Twitter. Or
What's a
Twitter.
cool tech hashtag? Like, what is the big hashtag for? I'm always tweeting like hashtag startup, hashtag founder. When I hashtag founder,
Do
we get a
people do
bunch of
hashtags
followers.
still? Do people still kind of
I think
find?
people are still clicking
Yeah.
on the hashtag.
Entrepreneur is a good one. And
Entrepreneur.
startup, yeah. I think
That,
those
we
in
get, every
general.
time we do it, we get followers for you,
Wow.
which is big time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We created,
Ecosystem.
yeah, we created a hashtag down there, and actually stole this from Missouri State in Springfield. But they created, when they rebuilt a particularly run-down industrial district, they called it the Idea District, Innovators, Designers, Entrepreneurs, and Artists. And I love that idea so much that in order to be able to track all the stuff that was going on in Arkansas,
Yeah.
we use hashtag ARIDEA, our idea, just a way to track,
Oh, cool.
yeah, to track the stuff that's going
I
on.
read that actually in Just Right Startup Communities, and in his book, he said the biggest way they built the traction in Boulder
Yeah.
was to define the hashtag and tell everybody
Wow,
about it.
That's right.
And he said
Wow.
that's your biggest way to build community.
And you can do that here. So you pick something that's meaningful to
Yeah.
the startup movement you're trying to do here, and then have everybody rally around that, so that everybody will be tied into
Yeah,
innovations.
that's cool.
Boulder is one of the coolest places
It is.
I've ever
I'm
been to.
fascinated by it
It's
now.
I went there. I spoke at a conference there. It was really weird. And just before me was the army guy from Bolton as well. You know who wrote all those books? Startup. Phenomenal.
Oh, you're
Jim
talking-
Collins. Jim Collins.
Okay.
Jim
Jim Collins and also Brad Feld, is it?
Yes, so
Brad,
Brad
yeah,
Feld.
so he wrote the book.
Yeah,
Brad
so
Feld.
Brad Feld and Jim Collins were speaking just before me. And then it was my turn to speak. When they left, everybody left. And I just started out with Brad and Jim still in the room. I said, well, I want to thank Brad and Jim for being the warm-up act. And a few people stayed because of that, but it was really embarrassing because you're speaking, nobody wants to hear you
No.
speak because Brad has left the building.
Yeah.
And he's one of the nicest guys.
He
He's
seems
one of the
it
few,
based
yeah.
on his YouTube videos alone, and he's just so great.
He makes time for everyone. I was amazed that he's one of the few stars that will make time for everyone. Because I wanted to
The
talk
book
to
is
him.
good too. Venture
Yeah.
Deals decodes a lot of the language that you need when you go through an angel rate. I'd recommend it.
Cool, yeah.
Venture Deals second edition.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's take a
I
break, there's
listened to the
coffee.
audiobook version of that,
Yeah.
and then like,
Or